Hello, everybody. We are live. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Leadership Live with me, JJ Hardy, and my man over here, Chris. Today, we're going to talk about something a little bit different: humility and feedback. But before we get into that, there's the other stuff. So, how you doing today, Chris?
I'm doing good, JJ. It's Friday. Um, we've had a week of freaking wicked rain. It's finally clearing up, so I'm hoping we're going to be dry for the next week or so. But other than that, I'm good. How about you?
Well, I can't complain. I was telling you before we started that this class that I'm taking is almost over. So
Yes.
my 12 to 14-hour days are going to be coming to a halt. And so literally zero complaints.
There you go. That's awesome.
But yeah, man, I'm excited. We're going to go into talking a little bit about humility and feedback, and that's kind of a great compliment to what we were talking about last week, because last week we talked about performance reviews.
Yes.
And when you think of performance reviews, you think of, telling somebody else what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and giving them a status check on how they're doing. But really, the most important thing out of that conversation is the feedback that they provide. And so that's really that where this stemmed from. So what do you think about all of this?
Yeah. It's a natural connection between performance reviews and humility and feedback. From a leadership standpoint, there's a lot to unpack here in both camps, right? Humility and feedback. But yeah, just kind of dovetail from the last live that we did. Performance reviews need to be a two-way street, right? It's not just the leader providing information, feedback, criticism, or anything to the people that report to them. There needs to be some kind of open dialogue. And that's where the humility comes in. That's where the feedback comes in. So I'm really excited to get into today's topic.
Yeah, me too. And you know, feedback is so important. And humility is comes in where you actually ask for that feedback, because a lot of times this is what I've noticed as once I was a junior guy, everything was coming at me. It was like bam, 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 all the way across the board. And it was really, really hard to even understand where I was. I did always ask for feedback from my people, but it was a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the reason it's important is because you have to put aside some of those preconceived notions that you may have about having subordinates, and really understand that everybody has an opinion, everybody has a background, and you never know what value that person is going to provide to the situations that you have going on with you and your team and everything else. And so asking for the feedback means that you can make yourself and your entire operation even better.
Absolutely. The one thing that I have really shifted over several years now is the perception of feedback, right? Most people, when they hear, hey, JJ, can I give you some feedback on this? The vast majority of people hear that word and they're like, man, here comes the negativity train.
Yeah,
So,
so true.
yeah, it's associated with like, hey, man, I'm about to pick apart what you just did. And a lot of times feedback is just that, right? It's rear facing, it's stagnant, it's pinpointing one specific thing and saying, hey, these are all the things that you did wrong. And often it doesn't prescribe how to get better or how to avoid that from happening in the future. So I've adopted this framework that's called feed forward. It was created by a gentleman named Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. He's like one of the pioneers of executive coaching. But the whole premise behind feed forward is that it's dynamic and it's future facing. So it's in this case, it's hey JJ, let's talk about this thing that happened on Thursday. We're going to talk about what happened that wasn't optimal, but that's only going to be a small percentage of the conversation. The rest of it is going to be now going forward. How do we prevent that from happening? What are some of the experiences that I've had that I could share with you that you can put into place so that you've got a greater chance of success? So the focus is more on future success, not past failure. And what I've gotten from that is people lean in. They're like, oh yeah, it's feed forward time. It's not feedback, have my ass chewed out time. It's, hey, let's together look at how we can make this situation better moving forward. So
I agree. And you know, that goes back to a few of the conversations we've had in the past. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Chris.
No, you're good.
No, but so some of the prior conversations we've had about when, you know, somebody maybe makes a mistake. We adopt this same mentality with that, right? So what's important is that you address what happened in that situation, whatever it was, whether it was repeatedly showing up late for work, or maybe their productivity has gone down and they've noticed it over the course of the last couple of weeks. It doesn't really matter what it is. But taking that situation and saying, I have noticed this and I want to find out more about it. So let's figure out how we can make it better. And it doesn't really matter if it's just, you don't have to call it feedback if you don't want to. It's just it's an idea that's centered around continuous improvement. And when you adopt that in everything that you do, not just at work, but at home and everywhere else, then really you create this ongoing mindset that we should all help each other and figure out how to make everything better around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does apply to everything. It applies to things that we're doing with our kids and our spouses. It applies to stuff that we're doing around the house. You know, you and I have talked about, I train jujitsu, and the last thing I want to do is keep getting caught in the same chokehold because I'm making the same stupid mistakes, right? I want to learn to get choked less and choke other people more.
That's right. So, that's right. Well, and sometimes we even do it ourselves, right? So when we were kids, it's that whole idea that when you stick your hand on the hot stove, you better not do that crap again.
That's right. Exactly.
Oh man, this whole topic is important because people, you're right. People have a negative mindset when it comes to feedback. But if you look at it as a way to improve always and to keep negativity from spreading inside of an organization because you have this idea to want to always get better, then, you know, people are really going to appreciate that. What people don't appreciate is that when you come up to them and you're having a conversation with them and then you find out something went wrong, it doesn't matter what it is, even if it's in their personal life. If you approach it as, oh man, you really screwed that up, well, that's hard. But if you can kind of lower your guard a little bit and just say, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And then, you know, help them through that situation and talk around it. If you take that and adopt it with every single situation you get yourself involved with, then not only are you making yourself and the other person better, but I keep on saying this, but man, everyone that starts learning what you do, it turns into this ripple effect. And it's also a form of culture improvement. Yeah. If you can get the people at the top to develop that same sort of mindset that feedback is not a bad thing. Feedback should be used as a tool, just like everything else, to figure out what's going right, what's going wrong, and where to move forward from here.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. But humility, man, humility. Let's talk about that. Let's, you know, there was a lot to the feedback thing, but it's a really kind of a simple concept. But humility is what a lot of people don't have. And I think that stems from the whole idea of us wanting to be right and maybe have a step forward on the other person and being able to set that aside. It's almost another form of active listening where you drop your self-interest a little bit
Mhm.
Maybe even give a little bit of yourself. Hey, I've made this mistake before too, and starting the conversation that way, and then moving forward. Because when you are vulnerable, when you have the that level of humility that you can start being vulnerable with the people that work not just under your charge but with you, there's a form of relationship building that goes into that. And then when feedback is given, just like what you were talking about a couple of minutes ago, it turns into a conversation, and it's not just, oh, I'm being told I'm wrong again.
Right.
Damn it, this sucks.
You know, a few things that when I hear humility, when I talk to people about humility, there are some misconceptions around what humility is. Um, and I always like to say that it's recognizing that you're human, right? The same three letters start the word humility as they do human.
You're right.
And humans are not perfect. So humility is that, like, all right, recognizing that not only am I not perfect, it's being vulnerable, like you said, sharing those times that your imperfection has led to a certain outcome that you didn't want, sharing that with someone else so that they don't get the same outcome, right? It's being open with people.
Yes.
And humility is also, it's the one thing that people get wrong about it is people think that, oh, well, when I'm humble, that means I just have to like roll over and let people walk all over me. That is not 100% not the case of humility. Humility is not weakness. There's a lot of strength that's involved in being humble and accepting when you're wrong. It's not even always that you're wrong. It could be that you and I are trying to figure out the path of success to get a certain outcome, and me saying, you know what, JJ, your idea is better than mine. Let's go with your idea. Not that mine was wrong. We could have still achieved the outcome with my idea, but there's something about yours that takes 3 steps away and it's going to help us get there faster. But it's not about being a doormat. Being humble is not about just rolling over and exposing your belly and saying, yeah, 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 I'm no, that's not it. It takes a lot of strength to be humble, and people don't always see it that way.
Well, and I think that's what causes toxic work environments, right? So when you have this negative connotation to not just not being humble only, it's all these soft skills. Uh,
Mhm.
People look at soft skills as like,
Touchy-feely.
I'm touchy feely,
Yeah.
I have to show my feelings and all of these other things. Well, there's a scale you got to tip there, right? So there's balance. You know, I absolutely believe in the idea that you should show strength for your people when you are in a leadership position at work. I think that's extremely important.
Mhm.
However, letting them know that you have that you expect yourself to make mistakes once in a while, it lets them know, even though you've told them before, I'm sure everybody says that mistakes, failure, first attempt in learning, the whole nine. There's all these fancy acronyms that go with screwing things up. But, letting them know that you make mistakes and that you don't always do the right thing, and we all have the ability to do that. Well, now you just got done spreading the message to that other person that you expect that they will do the same thing, but it's more than that. The feedback comes into it too, is that I need to know when you need help with something,
Mhm.
because if I'm going to make mistakes and I need to ask for help once in a while, then if you make mistakes, then you need to do the same thing.
Right. That is part of it, right? It's asking for help. Um, that is a form of humility of saying, "Hey, you know what? I I would value your input here. Um, I think I know how to skin this cat, but I'd love for you to weigh in on this." Whether or not I take the input that you give me, it still takes a lot of courage for me to ask you that. And when you put it in a leadership situation, when I'm asking the people that report to me, hey, what are your thoughts on how we achieve this goal? It's I'm demonstrating strength. They don't necessarily know it, right? But it's strength of, hey, I believe that I know what we could do, but I want you all to come up with a solution. And then when we move on with your solution, I have just made a deposit of leadership capital into that bank for the times that I do need to draw a hard line and say, you know what? No, everybody, we need to do it this way. I'm making a small withdrawal by being stern, but I built up all this leadership capital by seeking your input and then going with your solution.
Yeah. I actually call that something a little bit different. I call it the emotional piggy bank.
Okay.
And when you feed into others, let's look at it. You call it capital. That's a very business centered term. But
Yeah.
when you think about people, I mean, they're in the business, but they're emotional beings. So when you think of the emotional piggy bank, everything that you do while you're at work in your household, what it doesn't matter. When you're giving to others, what you're doing is you're filling up that emotional piggy bank. And at the end of the day, when that piggy bank is full and you take a deposit from it, which can be you've been late for a few days, let's go behind closed doors and have a conversation about this.
Mm-hmm.
And they drop their guard and they start feeling a little bit bad, but then you kind of build them back up by the time that you're done by coming up with a plan to improve this.
Right.
Well, when you take that money out of the emotional piggy bank, it's not going to have near the impact as it does when you're that person that's barking and knife handing and telling everybody how horrible they are, work, crack the whip, shut up, do what I say, all that other stuff. Well, if that's how your style is, and it happens, it's out there, I've seen it, I've witnessed it, I've been party to it, you don't want to give anything to that person. When they come down on you in a one-on-one setting, you're not going to give them anything. You're
Yep.
just going to sit there and you're going to take it.
Yep.
And you're going to walk away and you're going to be thinking to yourself, F this person. I can't believe they said that. And the whole 9 yards.
Yes.
And you're just going to go, if I could just meet that person outside of this job, I would just beat them into a pulp. But right. I don't know if anyone would go that far necessarily. I'm not saying that I would ever do it either, but my mind just went there, so I don't know. So, but when you can create an environment where people are giving to each other on an emotional level, which, by the way, what it doesn't seem like that's what you were saying in the very beginning when you were mentioning that, but it is. You're giving emotion. You're giving a little bit of yourself on a constant basis to your people. Then then you're building trust, and that trust is exchanged. So when you give something to them, even if it's just something so simple as a task for them to execute their way,
mm-hmm.
when it comes time for you to take from that, they actually look at it as, oh, you know what? It didn't work this time, but it's going to be okay, because I know that at the end of the day that I have ownership over everything that I'm doing in my section. And you create just wonderful relationships that way.
It was probably a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, someone gave me a compliment sandwich, right? Where, they started out comparing me against someone else, and it was my style versus this other person's style. And this other person, super extroverted, in your face. And then they gave me the compliment in between of like, but you have this like calm confidence. Like there's something about you that you're just calm, cool, collected. But then this other person, like they bring all this energy and things like that. And I said, okay, so they're kind of in your face. I'm not an in your face kind of person. But at the end of the day, when the time comes that I need to step up my energy level, then the people that I'm leading know that it's something serious. when that person tries to step up their energy level and they're already way up here, then the people that they're leading are like, oh, that's just Joe again. He's going from 100 to 110. Whereas, like, all right, Chris cruises at 75, and when he bumps it up to 100, there's a reason for that. I'm going to take it seriously. And so I kind of turned the sandwich around and said, I would prefer calm confidence over someone who's in your face and high energy all the time, because you know where it lies. At the same time, that high energy person isn't asking for the input. They're the ones that are like, this is how we're going. Follow me. Boom, boom, boom. And like you just said, the people are sitting back and they're like, all right, I just heard half of what you just said. And when I reflect on the half that I heard, most of it's going to be F this guy. I'm not going to do what he says. So,
yeah, you're right. And people will definitely learn who you are by the way you act regularly, not those moments where you should be getting more directive. They will think that everything you do is everything you do. So you're right. You really have to balance that. And it's okay to be assertive. It
sure.
really is. But getting overly emotional, we had this conversation when we did emotional intelligence a long time ago.
Yeah.
But when you get overly emotional and you're always up here, now talking loud and being who you are is not the same as doing it with emotion. And that emotion can be a negative emotion.
Right.
So when you're up there and you are barking things and you're not listening to people and that's the way you normally are, you're really going to have a struggling organization. But you're right. If you are that person who is just being who you are, but you are just empowering everybody most of the time, and then out of nowhere, because I'll be honest with you, most people know that JJ is just kind of a happy-go-lucky kind of a guy that's just really high energy. But when something happens and I start going off the handle, people pull me off to the side, and they don't just do it because I was flying off the handle. They do it because they want to know why I'm going off the handle. This is not you.
It's out of character.
It's out of character.
Right.
Why is it that this is happening? Because if you're doing this, then someone or something caused this. And from an employer standpoint, they will do the same thing. Somebody, maybe not, some people are kind of introverted and they'll just kind of be like, oh shit, JJ just went off today. Yeah. And they'll just kind of leave it alone. But I would say that most times somebody will come up to you and be like, oh man, are you okay? This isn't normal. Your employees will want to help because you already built that environment where they own their own stuff. You help each other out when it's necessary, and things just go with that give and take sort of relationship. So I agree with you, Chris. I think it's important to make sure that you are controlling those emotions and keeping that servant leadership environment, which a lot of companies don't do, but they should. And if you can adopt that just in your sphere of influence alone, then your team is probably going to be the high performers that all care about each other. Maybe not hang out outside of work, care about each other, but they're going to care about what's happening there because that environment has already been built.
You're right. And the tie into humility for that is that when you are constant, right? When people know what to expect, then yeah, those times that there's a blip, number one, they're more willing to step in and try to figure out what's going on so that they can help. But when you're constant in your actions and you ask for things, when you offer that humility, it comes across as a genuine, like, hey, Chris means this when he is asking for my input, when he is being, when he's deferring to my decision making. Like, that's genuine. It's not just him throwing up his hands like, okay, JJ, you got a better way of doing it, then we're going to do it your way.
That happens though so much.
It happens.
Well, but let's flip that on its head too, Chris. So this is also a way. I put out a video the other day in my Facebook group that talked about, I 1 in 5 people these days feel like they're lonely, they're isolated, and I'm not talking about those people that are working from home. That number is actually higher
I
for
believe it.
obvious reasons because they're working from home, but they're not engaging with people on a day-to-day basis. We're human beings. We're gregarious. I get it. That's the way we should be interacting with one another. But no, at work, hybrid and in-person environments, 1 out of 5 people are lonely. And in my opinion, that comes from a lack of engagement. So let's go. This is really kind of an effective communication type of thing, but let's take it from the other standpoint where we just got done talking about how we normally interact. When you pay attention to your people and you understand who they are from the same standpoint that you got done talking about, that they will step in and help you if you're having a bad day, if you know that people act a certain way and they're normally showing that humility in the workplace because you let them feel comfortable there, well, guess what? When they start pulling back and isolating, or maybe they have a bad day where they start screaming, you can do the same thing with them. You can do the same thing with your boss if that's the way that you interact with your boss, your peers. This is not just for somebody who's in a management position. This is universal, and it's really important that feedback, humility, knowing your people, knowing each other, having that collaborative workspace is extremely important. And mental health today is struggling. We had this COVID thing happen a few years ago, and we still have not recovered from that. So at the end of the day, if loneliness is starting to become a prominent thing in the workplace, we need to address it by making sure that people feel comfortable there with each other first, so that they're willing to accept the help when it's needed.
I think that every workplace should have a dedicated area that has jujitsu mats and workout gear. Because number one, nothing humbles you more than being submitted by someone who is smaller than you. And it creates connection between people.
What you're really trying to say is, they need a dedicated space for a good old fashioned ass whooping is really what you're trying to say.
That too.
But no, I mean, all jokes aside, this is important, people.
Yeah.
If you're listening now, you're listening later, whenever you're tuning in to watch this, please take care of the people in your work environment. I know that you're there for a 9 to 5 or to get your salary or whatever the case may be. But if we spend 90% of our time going somewhere else and not at our home to make money so that we can provide a living for our families, make it an experience that people don't feel like they need to go dread every day.
Yeah. Oh, please don't make coming to work. Don't make someone's Sunday suffer because they hate their job.
Yes.
That is so detrimental in so many ways.
Yes, I completely agree. Now we're kind of towards the end of our 30 minutes, Chris. But I just in good old fashioned the spirit of Leadership Live, I'm going to ask, what is a message that you have impart on our audience before we end today?
The big message that I have is, don't confuse humility with weakness. Humility actually comes from a place of strength and realizing that you're not perfect and that you don't know all the answers. It doesn't mean that you can't be assertive or aggressive sometimes, but humility is a great bonding agent with your people. So don't be afraid to use it. You will not be seen as weak when you're being humble. It's something that everyone should have in their toolbox.
And the only thing I'll add to that, Chris, is that, if you feel like you're getting to the point where you're showing too many of your cards, it is okay to create that balance and
Sure.
tip those scales and pull a little bit of yourself back. I understand that if I give too much of myself, I feel over vulnerable, and then I'll start feeling uncomfortable as well. Mm-hmm. So if that's really what you think of when you think of humility and asking people for feedback and actually meaning that asking for feedback, well, first of all, don't ever stop asking for feedback, but you don't have to give so much of yourself to other people.
Agreed.
There's only a certain amount. People say that work is your second family, but I hate to say this, but the people at work, they are not your family.
Mm-mm.
And so at the end of the day, just know that you can't fire your family. So you got to create it. You create an environment that is comfortable, but they are not your family.
Right.
That's really the only thing I have to add to that. And that may be a little bit harsh, but it's the God honest truth. So that's kind of it for today. Thank you for everybody who's tuning in now and who tunes in later. And if this stuff resonates with you, please like it, subscribe to the YouTube channels that you see this on for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Reshare this with your audience. Please spread the word that this stuff is important. Leadership, people need to learn it. But the most important thing is to put a comment below wherever you see this, because we need to keep the conversation going. This was another episode of Leadership Live. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
See ya.